As a part of the video series, we always try to introduce the learners to certain scenarios or doubts which they normally encounter when they start applying these concepts. In case of sampling, there is one such common issue. Now, this is the standard deviation formula we discussed. In this formula, the sigma we use is for the population. That is, this sigma represents the population standard deviation. When we know the population standard deviation, then it's a straightforward use of this formula to find the sample size. But in real life, do we have access to population data? Rarely, right? I mean, population data is very, very rare to be found in a real life process scenario. We actually deal with samples mostly. Then is it right to use a formula which has been derived from a population distribution? As per the central limit theorem, we learnt that the sampling distribution will attribute its properties to population only when the sample size and the number of samples are adequate. Hence, not all sampling distributions will reflect the population parameters. So it may not be right to use this formula for every sample or sampling distribution. So how do we manage this scenario? No worries, the same CLT or the central limit theorem, which appears to put a constraint on its usage here, is going to help us out. What we can do here is that we start with an appropriate sample size based on our process and the process knowledge. Idea should be that the sampling duration should include all known process variations or leans or peaks in the process. It may be a 5% thumb rule, or let's say in this case, we take an initial sample size of 30. Practically, then we complete the sampling activity. Then we take the mean and standard deviation for the sample collected. Use this data to compute the sample size. If this computed sample size is greater than 30, let's say we calculated or we computed the sample size and it came to 45, which is greater than the initial sample size that we started off with, which was 30. So then in this case, what we do is we take 15 more samples to reach the calculated sample size of 45. Now for this set of 45 data points, we recompute the mean and standard deviation. We again use this data to arrive at the sample size. We calculate the sample size. If this time the calculated sample size is close to 45, because we now have taken 45 sample points. So if this time the calculated sample size is close to 45 or equal to 45, then we can consider this sample as the most representative sample. If it's not the case, then we will have to repeat. If let's say the calculated sample size came to 60, then we need to take another 15. And there would be a time when the calculated sample size would be equal to the sample size from which that data has been calculated. That is the right sample size. That is going to be the most representative sample size, which will reflect the population parameters.